My name is Sterling Magleby. I'm from Utah, and I'm currently based in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. So I actually got my very first QA testing job as a senior in high school, which is longer ago than I care to admit. Then after doing a stint in the Army and some college, I came back into it. And I've always loved working on big, complicated systems, seeing how they tick, seeing how they come apart and how they break. So I've always had an attraction to cutting edge tech, and I've worked mostly in startups and cutting edge tech and the game industry for the last decade and change. It was a clear choice, right, to be looking at that. And I've always been fascinated by chatbots, even the early kind of terrible ones. So when they started coming out to be more lifelike, it was something I took an interest in right away. They contacted me. I think they saw my resume on a site, LinkedIn or Indeed, and they reached out to me. They were doing interesting stuff. I really liked the way that they matched people with potential clients as far as contract work, and I thought they did a really good job with their technical interviews, especially. I really thought that they were very carefully vetting people who really knew what they were talking about. It's definitely taught me a lot about, obviously, about, Gen AI testing, kind of some of its applications, how it works, which is obviously a huge win in the current economy. And it's also taught me some really interesting cultural insights because it's a very international organization. So I'm working with people from all over the globe, which is also something that I really enjoy. So all of my work with cutting edge tech has really helped me because you're working on something that changes very fast, right? This is an area where models can change on a weekly basis, where things are not necessarily deterministic, as in you put in input A, you don't always get output B every time. So you really need to come up with creative ways to do your testing. It forces you to think outside the box, which I've had a lot of experience doing. Well, like I said before, one of the big challenges is that you have differences in output every time. So you need to run a lot of tests and get a lot of data to compare. There's that big challenge. There's also the challenge that, they change constantly as the technology kind of improves and moves forward, and you have to keep up with everybody else who's working in it. That's definitely a big challenge. But by far the biggest challenge is just the probabilistic nature of the outputs that you're dealing with. I think we've developed some really good tools for kind of keeping track of, what you've been asking the models, definitely tracking, the data that you want to have analyzed, keeping track of the outputs, and a lot of good tools that do a lot of the really difficult work in finding just the right prompt that gets the results that you want. It's definitely honed my ideas of what Gen AI is most useful for, and and some ideas of what it's not as useful for. And one of the things that attracted me to this particular client was that they were using Gen AI tools for things that it's quite good at, helping developers to write code, helping data analysts to analyze data, helping people to summarize, large documents or large collections of documents. Those are really good use cases for Gen AI, as opposed to some companies I've seen that are using it for things that are really just not good use cases for it. I've learned a lot more about obviously analyzing Gen AI outputs and some of the tools that are available for kind of, essentially scoring them. And also I've learned quite a lot about, new methods for test automation architecture, things like WebSockets, some new ways of load testing. And I've also learned a lot about just testing Gen AI, where it breaks, how to stress it. You get a really good feel for how they behave. I'm really excited to see AIs that are able to handle larger contexts, meaning, they can handle larger collections of data. They can handle longer conversations where you can really have a long work session with the model where it can help you with a project over, series of steps that can stretch for hours, whereas right now it's a little more limited. You do lose your context as you go along.